Welcome to the Sunday Sessions podcast, a ministry of Cuyahoga Valley Church. Sunday Sessions is a weekly exploration of some of the most important topics and ideas in Christianity. Each week, we bring you thought-provoking content designed to equip you to follow Jesus more passionately. No matter where you are in your walk, there's always something new to discover. Whether you're looking to expand your knowledge or be challenged in new ways, this is the place for you. Let's get started.
All right, so I think most of you either know me or were here the first week when I shared a bit of my testimony, but just for those of you who weren't, just a really quick recap. I have been interested in apologetics for several years. I got interested in apologetics first when I was in college, and I started wrestling with some doubts about my own faith and also wanted to engage with other people's doubts. So I started studying apologetics a little bit. And now it's really useful to me because I work at NASA and I work with a lot of people that have apologetics type questions. So it's useful to me in conversations with my coworkers and that sort of thing. So that's why I'm here today. And the question that we are going to unpack today is actually a question that I heard a lot from people that I went to college with, and a question that I still hear a lot from people that I interact with today. And that is the question of, how can you say that there's only one true faith when there's so many different religions that are making so many different claims? Our author in our optional textbook starts off her chapter by sharing a story that her friend had gone through that kind of relates to this question. So her friend grew up in a very oppressive, coercive Islamic environment that really tried to push people into the Islamic faith. And eventually, he left that environment, he became a Christian, but now he's wrestling with this question of, okay, I came from an environment where people tried to push me to have a certain belief, and now I believe that Christianity is the one true faith, but how is it okay for me to share my faith? Is that really okay? How can I say that there's only one true faith? And the environment that he came from, where one true faith being Islam really was pushed on him, that helped him wrestle even deeper with this question. So that's the question that we're going to unpack today. And there's really two aspects to this question. The first aspect is what our textbook author calls the elephant metaphor. It's the idea that it's wrong to say there's only one true faith because there are many different religions, and supposedly those are all just different perspectives or different viewpoints on the same truth. So the reason she calls it the elephant metaphor is she uses an elephant to help us understand this concern. So put yourself in the shoes for a minute of someone who's looking at an elephant, and you see several different blind men, and they're all trying to describe what this elephant is. There's one that's touching its trunk, and it says, oh, the elephant's like a snake. There's one touching its ear and says it's like a fan. There's one touching its leg, says it's like a tree. One touching its side, they say it's like a wall. Someone touching its tail, they say it's like a rope. They touch the tusk, they say it's like a spear. The idea is they touch a different part of the elephant and they conclude that it's something different because they can't see it. And so this metaphor is supposed to apply to the different religions, where all the different religions are the different pieces of the element that this blind person is touching, and the elephant itself is the truth about God, or this spiritual reality. So that's the elephant metaphor, and at first it appears like it's a humble and respectful approach to all religions coexisting and working together. So that's the first aspect of this question of, how can you say there's one true faith? It seems like all the religions are just different perspectives on the same truth. The second aspect of this question is the idea that maybe it's insensitive or intolerant to say that there's only one way to God. Our author in our textbook tells us that most religious claims can't be proved beyond reasonable doubt. So if that's true, and you can't prove beyond reasonable doubt that your faith is the one right way, then isn't it kind of insensitive or intolerant to claim that you have the only right answer? She explains that, well, maybe it's fine for someone to believe that something is true for them. One religion claiming to be the truth seems absurd, and it seems like we should reject that because you can't prove it. So as we unpack this question today, we're going to look at both of those two different aspects. The first one being, it seems like all religions can just coexist, and the second one being, it seems insensitive or intolerant to say that we have the only right answer. Now, there's a little bit of a rub to this question for us as Christians, and that rub is, as Christians, we do believe that there is only one true faith. We do believe that putting your faith in Jesus Christ as God who came to earth and lived and died and rose again is the only way to be saved. So that's tricky for us because we are making the claim that this question says is an insensitive claim. Before we dive into how to unpack this question, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So let's take a look at some of the biblical reasons that we do believe that Christianity is the one true faith. The first one, which our textbook pulls out very, very well, is that Jesus himself said he's the only way. John 14:6, Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." So this is a very clear statement that Jesus is the only way to God. Also, we can look at John 10:9, where Jesus said, "I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture." Again, we see that idea of Jesus being the door or Jesus being the one way. John 11:25 through 26, Jesus is talking to Martha right before he resurrected Lazarus, and he says, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." So again, he's making that claim that he himself is the way. Peter drives this home really well in the book of Acts in chapter 4 when he's speaking to the council, and he says, "There is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved." So the biblical argument is very clear here. If you believe the Bible, you believe that Jesus is the only way to be saved. So we as Christians do firmly believe that. And not only that, we believe that Jesus himself was God. So some other religion that just believes that Jesus was a good teacher, that's not enough. That type of belief isn't enough. John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And here the Word is referring to Jesus. So this is a very clear statement that Jesus himself was God. So we've got a challenge here, folks. There's this question of how can you say only one faith is correct, but we as Christians say only one faith is correct. And that's the question that we're going to unpack today. At this point, I'd like to pause just for a couple minutes. You've got a set of discussion questions on your handout. So I'd like you to pick one and turn to someone nearby and just talk about that discussion question for a moment and think about this topic, and then we'll jump back in. Okay, I hope you had some good discussion and that you were able to think about whether you've encountered this question either in your own life or in someone that you've talked to or in some situation like that. We're going to unpack now what we do with this question. So to give you the roadmap for where we're going today, we're going to talk about three main things. The first one, and these are the three main sections in your handout. The first one is the problems with the elephant metaphor. We'll unpack what's wrong with this metaphor and how we kind of take it apart. The second thing that we're going to talk about is how we as Christians who do believe there's one true faith hold fast to that truth while still being respectful, inclusive, and tolerant. And then finally, we're going to take a very brief look at some positive evidence that can help give us confidence that Christianity is, in fact, the one true faith. So as I talk today, besides the textbook that Becca already mentioned, there's three other books that I pulled information from that I just want to reference because I will be quoting them at various points. The first is The Reason for God by the late Tim Keller. This is a really good introductory apologetics book. It's fairly straightforward, it's fairly palatable. So if you're looking for another good book to read, this might be a good one to look at. The second one is The Compact Guide to World Religions. This one has many different authors, but the editor is Dean Halverson. And this one I used to just get some information on different world religions, since that's going to touch briefly on our topic today. And then finally, The Comprehensive Guide to Apologetics. Again, many different authors, but it was edited by Joseph Holden. I have all three of these books up here, so if you want the details on them, just come on up afterwards and talk to me, and I can give you those. But I'm going to be pulling information from those books as we talk today. One other thing that I want to note that you have in your handout is at the end of each of our three major sections, I've put a little summary of what we talked about in that section. The purpose of this summary is to help you remember some of the overarching ideas from that section. Since this is a lot of information, it's a lot to digest. So hopefully those summaries are helpful for you as you're looking back at your handout in the future and trying to remember what we talked about. With that, let's go ahead and jump into our first major topic, which is the problems with this elephant metaphor. There's two big problems with the metaphor, and the first problem is that this metaphor is actually a contradiction. Now, first of all, the idea behind the metaphor is we want to try and find a humble and respectful approach to different religions. And I fully believe that it is a genuinely well-intentioned attempt to do that. However, if you actually unpack what the metaphor is saying, it's actually an arrogant metaphor, folks. There's one thing that I didn't notice about this metaphor when I was first reading it that some of you might not have noticed either. The elephant analogy only works because the narrator, the person looking at the elephant, is not blind. Now, if you think about it, all of the different people who are touching this elephant and trying to understand what it's like, or the different religions, they're blind. They can't see the full picture of what's going on. But this supposed narrator who's putting everything together can see the full picture. So essentially what they're doing is they are assuming that they have superior knowledge about how God and spiritual reality works that none of the other religions have. It's actually an arrogant claim, although it doesn't mean to be. So that's the first reason that this metaphor is itself a contradiction. The second reason is it's actually logically inconsistent. The metaphor is essentially saying the specific doctrine or the specific theology that a certain religion has doesn't really matter. It's not important what that specific theology is. It's only important that they're trying to get to God. However, in order to believe that all religions are a path to God, you have to make some theological claims. You have to essentially make some doctrine of your own. Specifically, you have to assume some things about what God is like. You have to assume that he can be seen in different ways and from different perspectives, and that you have to assume that he encompasses all of the truths of the different religions and that he isn't specific. So in order to claim that all religions coexist, you almost have to develop your own religion. In The Reason for God, Tim Keller put it this way. He said, the proponents of this view do the very thing that they forbid in others. They're saying that there's equally valid religions. They're all equally valid. They're all equal ways to God. But in saying that, they're claiming that there's only one right way to understand spiritual truth, that all religions are valid. So essentially, by claiming that there is no one true faith, they are making one true faith. That's why this metaphor is actually logically inconsistent, because it does the very thing it forbids. Finally, as we talked about at the beginning, the goal of this metaphor is partially to try to be respectful and inclusive. But it's actually not any more respectful or inclusive than the other religions that are claiming there's one true faith. It's doing the same thing that it says other religions are disrespectful for doing, and it's asserting that there's only one right answer. As we just looked at, essentially it's saying the only right answer is that all of the answers are right. And so by trying to include all religions, the Compact Guide to World Religions puts it this way. It says, the belief that all ways lead to God excludes the belief that there is only one way to God. So those are the reasons that this elephant metaphor is actually a contradiction. The second problem with the elephant metaphor is that coexistent faiths are actually not possible. This doesn't seem to make sense at the outset, and so we need to back up for a minute. And I'm going to talk about something called objective truth. So we're stepping out of the metaphor for a minute, and we're just going to talk about the very definition of truth. What is truth? So in our culture today, a lot of you have probably encountered something that people usually call relativism. Relativism is the idea that whether or not something is true depends not only on the factual basis of that thing, but also on perspective. It's the idea that truth is relative and there are no absolute truths. That's relativism. we can see from our lives that in some cases, this can actually be true. Let's take favorite color as just a silly example. My favorite color is blue. So to me, the best color is the color blue. My husband's favorite color is green. So to him, the best color is green. I have my truth about what the best color is, and he has his truth about what the best color is. That's an example of relative truth. However, there are some problems with this idea of relative truth. The first one is that there are some things that are just absolutely true. Our author explains this really well in her textbook when she brings up the Me Too movement that started several years ago. And she discusses that everyone agrees that there is a truth about whether or not an assault occurred. It may be hard to prove whether or not someone was assaulted, but it's a fact, either they were or they weren't. Again, we might not know what the fact is, but still there's a fact there. It can't be both. They can't have been assaulted and not been assaulted. It's only one or the other. So there is a definite truth of whether or not that occurred. That's an example of something that is simply absolutely true. Another example that hits a little closer to home for those of us Christians is what happens when someone dies. When someone dies, either Jesus will call them back to life or he won't. Depending on whether or not they were a believer, he may or he may not. And for a minute, let's just step back and say, okay, we're going to say that maybe Christianity is true. Let's step back and just accept that as a maybe for now, just to look at this case. If Christianity is true and this person was a believer, then Jesus will call them back to life. If Christianity is not true and this person was a believer, then he won't. Both aren't going to happen. Only one is going to happen. We may not know which one it is that's going to happen, but there's only one that's going to happen. It can't possibly be both. That can't be a relative truth. There's no way that whether or not that happens can be relative. So that's another example of something that's just absolutely true. The second problem with this idea that truth is relative is that it actually violates its own claim. So in order to say that there is no belief that can be held as universally true, you have to make that statement universally. In order to say there's no such thing as absolute truth, you have to say it with absolute truth. It's a circular argument. It's a self-defeating concept. So essentially, if you're insisting that there is no such thing as real truth, why should I believe you? That's the idea behind why relative truth doesn't work as a concept. Now, this extends to historical truth as well. We as Christians claim that Jesus was raised from the dead around the year 33 AD. That is a historical claim. We are making a claim on something that happened in history. So just like whether or not an assault happened, there's an either or here. Either that did happen or it didn't. It's not possible that it both did and didn't happen. That's a historical fact that we are claiming about. So either it's true or it's false. There's no other option. As our author put it, our believing or not believing in the resurrection may change us, but it does not change the objective reality of what took place 2,000 years ago. So I took this side tangent to talk about truth and to establish that there is such a thing as objective truth because we need to use this information to unpack why it's not possible that all religions coexist. And frankly, the reason that it's not possible for all religions to be true is that religions contradict each other. They make competing claims about the same event. They claim that it happened different ways, and whether or not they're right has huge implications on the core doctrine of that religion. So that's why it's not possible that all religions are true. Just for an example, we're going to look at the Abrahamic religions. So that's Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. In our textbook, our author tells us Christians believe that Jesus rose from the dead. Muslims believe that Jesus did not die, but that he was instead taken up into heaven. Jews and atheists and agnostics believe that Jesus died and remained dead. These claims are mutually exclusive. So we just looked at historical reality and how it's not possible that something both happened and didn't. These three religions are making different claims about the same event. So at most, it's only possible that one of those religions is true. Because if Jesus was God and was raised from the dead, that is a blasphemous claim to both Islam and Judaism, which means if Christianity is true, it's impossible that Islam and Judaism are also correct faiths. So in summary, this is the first of those 3 summaries I told you about that we're going to look at. Despite what at first seems like, it's not actually humble, respectful, or possible to claim that all faiths are right. Instead, this claim is a contradiction. It creates a new faith that affirms and denies different aspects of other major religions. Now, since we've seen that the elephant metaphor doesn't work and that it's not possible to claim that all of the faiths are right, let's look now at that idea of respect and inclusivity and tolerance, and how we as Christians can say we have the only right answer, but yet still say it with respect, with inclusiveness, and with tolerance. Let's look at respect first. I'm going to be bringing up some definitions in this section, going to some dictionaries and that sort of thing. So the first one is a definition of the word respect. This is a definition of the verb respect from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. And it says, to consider worthy of high regard. That's respect, to consider worthy of high regard. Now, of course, the question is to consider what worthy of high regard? Are we considering every religion worthy of high regard? Or are we considering every person worthy of high regard? There's a difference. Are we respecting people or are we respecting beliefs? And our textbook argues very succinctly. She quotes her professor who said, it's often said that you should respect other people's beliefs, but that's wrong. What's vital is that you respect other people. So if you think about this elephant argument, essentially it's saying that other people are wrong about their own beliefs for the reasons that we looked at of how religions can't coexist. But in reality, what we are doing as Christians who say we disagree with you is we are respecting people enough to disagree with them without saying that they're wrong about their own beliefs. So essentially, we extend respect to people by treating them as worthy of high regard. And we do that partially by respecting them enough to not agree with them, but to still treat them with respect as beautiful creations made in the image of God, just like the people in this room. So it's not disrespectful to say that we have the only right religion as long as we treat the people with respect. We don't have to respect every single belief. You probably disagree with some of your closest friends on some things. You still respect them very much. You just don't agree with them on every single little thing. We don't have to agree with people on every single little thing to extend great respect to them. In summary, we respect other people, but we respectfully disagree with other beliefs. Moving on to the second issue here, let's look at inclusivity. Because as Christians, we are called to love our neighbor, and our neighbor is the people around us. So if someone is claiming that we are not being inclusive, we need to take that seriously and really ask the question of, are they correct? But let's look at what inclusivity means from a biblical point of view. Jesus, the founder of our faith, was a highly inclusive person to the point where he was very countercultural when he walked here on earth. Our faith is, therefore, an inclusive faith because we follow Jesus. So looking at the way that Jesus extended inclusivity, he beckoned all who are weary and heavy laden. We see that in Matthew 11. He commended many people that weren't necessarily considered the highest class of people to the Jews he was around. He commended a Roman centurion in Matthew 8. He commended a Samaritan, who there were major cultural differences with in Luke 10. He commended a tax collector, who is someone who was looked down on in the culture in Luke 18. He commended a sinful woman in Luke 7. And he associated with social outcasts. We see that in Luke 19. He associated with sinners, Luke 15. And in general, Jesus met people where they are at, in physical hunger, in spiritual hunger, with leprosy, with impairments, if they were lost. Jesus met people where they were at, and he welcomed everyone to the truth of his gospel. We see in Revelation 7:9 that the gospel is for the whole world. So our religion is an inclusive religion in that we include everybody. It is not an inclusive religion in that we include every belief. Now, this may be a little bit difficult to swallow for some people who are really wrestling with inclusivity, because we include all people, but we don't include all beliefs. There's one thing that I would offer that you consider as we're thinking about whether or not it's okay for us not to include all beliefs. We as people don't deserve salvation. We are fully sinful, and we are separated from God by our sin. He loves us enough that he made a way for us to be saved, but we have a choice about whether or not we choose that way. This idea that we don't all deserve salvation is going to get unpacked a lot more next spring, so as much as I wish I had time to go into it today, I don't. But I would just invite you to consider that as you're still wrestling with whether or not it's okay not to include all beliefs. The idea that it's not okay not to include all beliefs somewhat stems from this perspective of everyone deserves salvation, but that's not actually true. The last aspect that I would like to look at as far as inclusivity and respect and tolerance is that aspect of tolerance. So again, we're going to go to the dictionary. This is actually some definitions that come from the Compact Guide to World Religions. And we're going to look at 3 different kinds of tolerance. The first one is legal tolerance. This is the recognition that each person has the legal right to believe whatever he or she determines is true or best. Essentially acknowledging everyone has the right to make their own decisions. That's legal tolerance. The second type of tolerance is social tolerance, the recognition that people ought to be treated with dignity and respect regardless of their religious beliefs. So this is the idea that we should treat all people well, as made in the image of God, no matter what they believe. The third type of tolerance is uncritical tolerance, the notion that no religious belief should be evaluated as being false or inferior to any other religious belief. All beliefs should be granted equal status as a claim to truth. So uncritical tolerance is essentially kind of bringing that elephant metaphor back up. It's saying we should accept that everyone's claim is true. That's uncritical tolerance. Now, the reason I bring these 3 up is I want to make a very clear distinction in what we say when we mean tolerance. As Christians, we absolutely want to extend those first 2 kinds of tolerance. We absolutely want to give people the choice to make their own decisions. Jesus did that. He didn't force anyone to follow him. He gave them the option. And we absolutely want to treat people with respect and dignity, no matter what their background is. Again, we just saw that Jesus did that. Jesus was inclusive, and we also want to be inclusive and respectful. So we absolutely extend those 2 kinds of tolerance. The only type of tolerance that, as Christians who say there's only one true faith, we don't extend is this uncritical tolerance, which is this acceptance that all of the different religious claims are equally valid. And essentially, we unpacked that one when we looked at the elephant metaphor. But just to peek at it really, really quickly, again, it says that Christianity's claim to exclusivity is false. So it's a logical contradiction. Just like the elephant metaphor was a logical contradiction, this uncritical tolerance is a logical contradiction because it doesn't allow for religions to be the only way. So it can't possibly allow for all religions to coexist. I also want to mention that it's not intolerant to disagree with someone. It just means that we don't accept their beliefs as true. Intolerance would be not giving someone the right to make their own decision or not treating someone as well because of the decision that they've made. We should absolutely do those things. We should give them that right. We should treat them well. We extend tolerance to other people and to other cultures. We just don't tolerate viewing other beliefs as equal to God's truth. That's the important distinction that we need to make here. So as we look at our summary for our second major section here, it says we can and should claim that Christianity is the one true faith. We saw that in the introduction when we talked about the biblical bases, while still being respectful, inclusive, and tolerant. We respect other people, though we respectfully disagree with other beliefs. We include everyone in the invitation to Jesus, though we do not include other beliefs in the salvation that Jesus said was only through him. We are tolerant of people with other beliefs, but we disagree that other beliefs are a way to God, and we believe that we have life-saving truth to share with them. Now that we've seen why the metaphor doesn't work and all religions can't coexist, and we've seen how we can hold fast to truth with respect, inclusion, and tolerance, I want to encourage you guys with a little bit of positive evidence for how we can have a little bit more confidence that Christianity really is the one true faith. So this is our third major section in your handout. First of all, Christianity is a unique faith. Obviously, the fact that it's a unique faith doesn't prove that it's the right answer, but it is kind of interesting that it stands out among the other faiths. So a lot of this information in this section comes from that compact guide to world religions. And one of the things that it mentions is the fact that Jesus lived in history isn't unique. The fact that the founder of our faith lived in history is not unique, but it is unique because our entire religion pivots on how Jesus lived and the fact that he lived. That is a very unique thing about their faith. Also, our faith is unique because, I mentioned this really briefly when we were talking about inclusivity, we believe that humanity is spiritually dead. We believe that humanity's spiritual condition is fully dead and fully separated from God, and that we need Jesus to bridge that gap. The Compact Guide to World Religion says humanity's spiritual condition is far worse off in Christianity than in any other religion. Now that's kind of interesting because this next point really ties that together with the fact that we believe humanity is spiritually dead and the unique fact that our God sacrificed himself for us. You don't see that in any other religion, the way that you see it in Christianity. And that brings us to what, to me, is the most amazing, unique quality of our faith. And that is that we believe salvation is a free gift, not something that we earn through works. That sets Christianity apart in a huge way because other religions are generally very works-based religions, believing that we can contribute to our salvation and that there's something that we can do to help us get there. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense why people would come up with religions like that are works-based, because naturally, we as people want to feel like we can get there. So Christianity is highly unique in that it says you can't get there. You need Jesus to step in the gap for you because you can't do it. So those are just some of the brief ways that Christianity is unique. Now, the second thing I want to look at is some evidence in the Bible that helps us have some confidence that Christianity is the one true faith. Now, at this point, you're probably saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're turning to the Bible, which is your religious book. So if I don't believe in your religion, why should I trust your Bible? Pastor Joe is going to talk about that when he goes through chapter 6. But for right now, I'll just give you a little teaser. The Bible is a very historically reliable document, and even scholars who don't believe in Christianity will say that the Bible passes all of the tests of historical reliability very well. So we look to the Bible for a source of spiritual truth for us, but we can also look to the Bible as a history book, and that is why I'm going to bring you some evidence from the Bible. The first thing that I want to bring up is something that C.S. Lewis popularized as the Lord Lunatic Liar argument. It's helpful because it's 3 L's. It's amazing maybe he was a pastor, I don't know. So the Lord Lunatic Liar argument essentially goes this way. The Bible tells us that Jesus claimed to be God. So there's 2 possible options. He was right or he was wrong. If he was right, then he's Lord. If he was wrong, then, again, there's 2 possible options. He was wrong and he didn't know it. That means he was crazy. He said he was God, he was wrong, he didn't know it, he was crazy. The other possible option is he was wrong and he did know it. That means he was lying. He was not God and he said he was God and he knew it, that means he was lying. So really, we only have 3 possible options. Jesus is Lord and Savior, Jesus was a lunatic, or Jesus was lying. So anyone that says Jesus was just a good man, he was just a good man, he was just a good prophet, impossible. There's no way that Jesus was a good man if he wasn't God, because he was lying or he was crazy because he claimed to be God. Rebecca, our author, brings up this point that Jesus claimed to be God, and she quoted this argument given by C.S. Lewis, and she said, "This is either the teaching of an egotistical maniac or an evil manipulator or God in the flesh. It's not possible that he was something different." Now, the second piece of evidence from the Bible is simply the eyewitness accounts. In 1 Corinthians 15, we see that there were over 500 people that Jesus appeared to after his resurrection. There are also other places in scriptures where there's many eyewitness lists that are given. And the Bible was, most scholars agree, completely done being written by about the end of the first century. And 1 Corinthians was written a lot earlier than that. So the people that were being referenced in the Bible were still alive when the Bible was being read. So they could have gone and asked them, is this how it really happened? And yet we see nowhere in history where anyone says, no, that's not how it really happened. I was there. We don't see that, even though the eyewitnesses were around and could corroborate it. Now, finally, I'm going to breeze through this one because we're running out of time, but I want to mention evidence in first century culture. That's what it says in your handout, so we're moving on to that section. Outside of the Bible, if you look at culture, you see that in general, worldviews don't change overnight. It takes a long time for worldviews to change, for people to change their perspectives on religion and that sort of thing as a whole in culture. However, in Christianity, the worldview did change overnight. Jesus was raised from the dead, and all of a sudden, you have people saying that there was a man that was God and was raised from the dead. Now, this is amazing because of a couple different reasons. First of all, the people who were saying that Jesus was raised from the dead were Jews. They were saying that this man was God and they were Jews. That was a blasphemous claim unless it was actually true. So this was a really big step for these people to take. Also, I want to point out, all of the people that were claiming this, they really meant it. The apostles that followed Jesus, almost all, if not all of them, were martyred for their faith. So they claimed to see Jesus rise from the dead, they proclaimed this for the rest of their lives, and then they died for it. They knew whether it was true or not because they were there. So if they didn't actually see Jesus rise from the dead, why did they die? Because they said they did. Those are some of the arguments that we see in first century culture for why Christianity is the one true faith. Now, I want to point out, these are not the reasons that we put our trust in God. We put our trust in God because he is God and because he gives us the ability to have faith in him. But these are some areas that can help you have confidence. So as we look at the summary of this last section, Christianity is unique from world religions, and there's considerable evidence from the witnesses in the Bible, which is a historical document, as well as from the culture shift after the resurrection to support our belief that Christianity is, in fact, the one true faith. Now, as we wrap up, I want to ask a question. Why do we need to keep insisting Christianity is the one true faith? Now, the answer is fairly simple to that. Because we believe that it is. We saw those biblical arguments at the beginning. We do. If we believe the Bible, we believe that Jesus is the only way to be saved. And it is impossible that the other world religions are alternate ways to God. So even though it's easier to say, oh, well, at least my friend knows God. Maybe they follow Islam or Judaism, but at least they know God. They are just as much doomed as people who are atheists or agnostic. So we as believers have the opportunity to share the truth of our one true faith with them. Our author did a really good job of putting it very succinctly. She said, we start believing that our friends are not even wrong. We fail to test our own beliefs, and where beliefs carry life and death consequences, we fail to love our friends. So if we want to love others, we need to stand firm and insist that Christianity is the one true faith. Now, as we conclude today, how do we use what we've learned to share our faith with others? First of all, we have to acknowledge that some Christians have probably claimed that Jesus is the only way in a way that was arrogant or intolerant or unloving. Friends, I've done that. I will admit it. When I was a baby Christian, I did that. And so we need to recognize that there are some people that have probably gotten some really wrong perspectives about our faith because of that. We also need to acknowledge the biblical truth that Jesus did say he was the only way. So if we believe the Bible, we believe that our friends who are not following Jesus are going to go to hell unless they put their faith in Jesus Christ. So we need to acknowledge those two facts, and we need to share our faith winsomely with the people in our lives. So depending on the specific struggle that they're facing, We can walk them through the process of explaining why it's not intolerant or disrespectful to claim that there's one true faith. We can explain to them this idea that different religions make competing claims, so it's not possible that they're both correct. We can clarify for people who are doubting that Jesus really did say he was the one way to God. We can clarify that that is the only way. And we can share some of the evidence for how it's reasonable to believe that Christianity really is the one true faith. My hope is that some of these summaries I've given you in the different 3 sections will kind of help jog your memory and help you to be able to remember what we've talked about today, so that as you're looking back, trying to prepare to have these conversations with your friends, you can remember a little bit of what we talked about. Now, another thing that I want to mention that can help you apply what we've learned today is we've put together some summaries of the chapters that we're going to be going over this week. I don't think that they've been handed out yet, but I think we're going to start handing them out next week, and I think Becca's also going to email them out. So those would be good references to have. They're all just one-page documents that summarize some of the arguments in each of the chapters. And so they're a lot easier to collect and to read through than an entire book, and they can help you remember some of the facts that we're learning about that you can use as you're lovingly sharing your faith with your friends. So right now, I would like to give you just a couple minutes to discuss your second set of discussion questions and think about how we can apply what we've learned today, and then we will come back together and we'll close. I hope you had some good discussion and were able to think a little bit about how you can use what we've talked about today to share your faith or to be encouraged in your own faith. As we close, I just want to give a quick teaser for next week. So next week, I believe Rich Antko is going to be, this lovely gentleman right here, is going to be teaching you about, doesn't religion hinder morality? He's going to be unpacking that question. So you'll hear from him next week, and I want to give a little bit of a heads up as you're reading your textbook for the next week. If you have young folks that are reading along with you, there is a little bit of violent content at the beginning of that chapter. And so I would just encourage you to read it first and see if you're okay with your young folks reading it before you pass the book off to them. So I just wanted to give you a heads up about that. But she's got a lot of really good points in that chapter. So I hope that that encourages you this week. Let's go ahead and pray, and then you guys can head out. Father God, thank you so much for the truth that you made a way for us. Thank you for that reality that even though we are on our own fully separated from you, that you made a way for us to be with you and to be saved. I thank you so much that you love us enough that you did that. Thank you for the truth that we got to unpack today. Thank you that you are a God who made people in your image and that they are worthy of respect and of being included and of having tolerance extended to them. God, thank you so much for that. And thank you for all of the people who have gone before us who have looked at some of these arguments for there being multiple faiths that coexist and helped us understand why that doesn't work together. Thank you for that, God. Thank you for this class and for these hearts that want to learn. God, would you please sow into their hearts today whatever it is that they needed to hear, either to be encouraged in themselves or to be able to share their faith well with those that they love. God, please, would you work a miracle out of this class and just spark them to learn more about you and to share you and to love you and to love others better. Thank you so much for how you love us and for the opportunity to gather here today. We praise you and we submit all of this to your will. In your Son, Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Sunday Sessions. We're hopeful that you found this content so important for your spiritual growth that you'll want to learn more. Each week, we provide a PDF handout for notes and additional resources for study on the topic. You can always find these resources in the show notes or by visiting cvconline.org/Sunday Sessions. May the Lord bless you this week, and we hope you'll come back next week for another episode of Sunday Sessions.